Hello, I'm Dr. Mercy, and this video I am doing it specifically to bid farewell to President George W. Bush, and I'm also asking that he considers seriously to pardon Zimbabwe. Since 2001, Zimbabwe has had sanctions, and as he leaves office, please pardon Zimbabwe. Before sanctions, Zimbabwe had lots of food. I went there to do research, and I was able to buy food, and that was in 1998. And this is what has become of the Zimbabwe family and child. When they look for food, this is what they see after the imposition of sanctions by USA, EU, and the UK. Today, Mr. President, we find the healthcare system has been affected due to the brain drainage. And we find blacks in particular, you know, this is what is happening to the poor. They've become poorer. And you can see this woman here is an analogy that the Zimbabwean woman today, the rich have become excessively rich while the poor are bearing the burden. The inflation in Zimbabwe today, Mr. President, after the imposition of sanctions, the inflation is now at 238%, 238 million %. So you will find this little boy here is trying to go and buy a loaf of bread. For $1 US, it's billions of Zimbabwe dollars. And Mr. President, I beg you, you said this will not happen under your clock. And due to the economic sanctions in Zimbabwe, this is what has happened to the black child of Zimbabwe. And that's why I am saying this is genocide, Mr. President. And I'm kindly asking that you pardon. Zimbabwe today is almost in jail. That's, you know, when we have unemployment rate at 80%, that's just as good as being in jail. Mr. President, what happened in 2006, after I had done my research in Zimbabwe, I came back and I put all my findings into this book here, where I am saying HIV/AIDS terror awakens the voiceless child. This was even before the imposition of sanctions. I sent a copy to various heads of states, including Prime Minister Tony Blair, and I received a letter of thanks from their office. I sent a copy to you in 2006, and the White House sent me a return to sender, and the book was returned. So as I say goodbye to you, I would like to read some of the things I thought you would read. This is what I wrote to you in 2005, Mr. President. We are passing through this world once. Do you love a nation for what you can get from it or not? If you cannot get anything from a marginalized, weak, poor nation, do you drop a ton of burning bricks on its hopeless, helpless, AIDS-terrorized, hungry orphans? I'm sure the answer would be no. Mr. President, I also was hoping you would read from my book. I was listening to you on May 31, 2005, and a journalist asked you what life meant to you. And you said culture of life means responsibility to the less advantaged, and to recognize that We have responsibility to have people with AIDS on the continent of Africa and also to help the poor. But Mr. President, what has happened to Zimbabwe? Imposition of satanic sanctions. Please, Mr. President, they need to go. Please, Mr. President, today Israel gets $15 million per day, Mr. President. And today, Zimbabwe, there is extreme poverty. And we are simply saying, please lift the sanctions. And Mr. President, Mr. Billy Graham on June 2005 said, to discriminate based on color or race is a sin. So, Mr. President, if you can give Israel $15 million to spend a day, please lift the sanctions from Zimbabwe. Mr. President, one day you were asked on CNN here in the United States, and you were asked about China. Mr. President, what do you have to say about the U.S.-China relationship, especially with China's human rights abuse? Because we hear Zimbabwe is being punished for human rights abuse. Mr. President, you said China's situation is complex. China's economy is booming. We must assist. We must be partners with China for economic growth. We must keep telling them to do the right thing. China is a fascinating country, you said, Mr. President. The relationship is to be kept alive, you said, Mr. President. We must keep reminding China about Dalai Lama. We must remind China about religious freedom, that it leads to peace. We must deal with this complex relationship to keep it alive. Mr. President, I am saying, please remember Zimbabwe. Under your clock, we don't want to leave a legacy of poor children. This is what is happening in Zimbabwe. And Mr. President, what happened? You know, God says you must love everybody. Zimbabwe doesn't have nuclear weapons. And Mr. President, let's go back to the old-time religion. I'll say goodbye by singing this song which says, give me that old-time religion, old-time religion.